What's up, basketball coaches, players, and fans? Welcome to the Pass First podcast, where we share our knowledge of the game. My name is Alex Engel, and I'm here with my partner, Augie Johnston. Today, we have a special guest, Coach Rooney from Cal State East Bay. He's the head coach, and he's going to be joining us to talk about everything related to basketball IQ. If you've been listening on iTunes, on Spotify, or been following us on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe so you're kept up to date on all the newest releases from us. So without further ado, let's get right into today's episode. All right, welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said earlier, we have Coach Rooney here. He's the head coach at Cal State East Bay, and we're going to be talking to him today about everything related to basketball IQ and just kind of the mental side of the game. But before we get into it, Coach, we always like to have a little background on, our guests. So first off, thank you for joining us. And secondly, if you could give us, the little short 2-3 minute background on who you are, where you're from, and everything else that the viewers need to know.
Awesome. Well, fellas, I appreciate you having me. It's obviously in a very much a Zoom world, and we keep looking, we keep telling our players and even our kiddos that we're trying to look for the silver linings in all of this. And I will say the sharing of information, just coaches being so open with what they're doing and just how we can better the game. Something we hear a whole lot, and that's certainly something that I've been taking a ton of advantage of, or tried to. So I appreciate you having me involved and me being able to learn from you as well. Grew up, we moved around a little bit so I'm one of four boys. Dad's job kind of took him at certain places, but I went to high school in Stockton, so St. Mary's in Stockton, and had a great experience, played for some really good coaches and played a couple sports, and actually played a year of college football right out of high school. And then I went the junior college route and played basketball for 2 years. And then I played final 2 years at Dominican and had just a tremendous opportunity after I finished playing to get right into coaching. And so Bill Tressler was the coach at Dominican at that time. And I finished playing for him and jumped right into it and had just a lot of fun. I was hooked pretty early. I thought, kind of growing up, being around really good coaches, really good mentors, I had a pretty good idea I want to get into coaching. But certainly my first experience, with a whistle, doing scouting reports, doing recruiting, all those type of things, I was hooked. And so I stayed with Coach for a couple years at Dominican. Then he got the job at San Francisco State, and I went with him for a year, San Francisco State. And then I joke with my wife. She's, as many coaches will tell you who are married, that's the best recruit ever. And that absolutely is the case with me. I've overachieved in a lot of ways, no bigger one than that. And so the first concession of marriage was moving down to Southern California. That's where she was from, and she had a job. And so we got married, and I coached for a year at Claremont McKenna with Ken Scalmanini, a great league in the SCIAC, high academic. Actually, and I'm sure you guys know this, Greg Popovich, with the Spurs, actually spent some pretty formative years coaching at Pomona Pitzer, which is literally right across the street from Claremont McKenna. So a great rivalry, and was really an impactful year for me in terms of kind of growing basketball knowledge and the motion offense that Coach Scalmanini ran and continues to run to this day. And then, honestly, I got lucky. I interviewed for a job at Cal Maritime, who was in the league when I was playing at Dominican. And so had some experience with it, but I didn't know exactly what I was getting into. And I don't even mean from school. I mean, just being a head coach. And so I was fortunate to be selected there and was there for 10 years. And we enjoyed a decent amount of success, and then got an opportunity a couple of years ago here at East Bay. So I've been at East Bay for the past 3 years as a head coach, and hoping like crazy that we get into year 4 here, probably after the new year. But yeah, it's been a great road. As I said before, just great mentors that I've been around, but fantastic players, fantastic student athletes. And so, and again, it's not just guys you coach, it's guys, like you, Alex, that I've competed against and we've competed against. And Augie, obviously, your experience in Monterey Bay and, the connection with Coach Costa. And so I'm just excited to be here and talk shop a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for, giving everybody a background on that. I didn't actually know all of that. Obviously I knew up to Maritime, and I figured you'd probably been somewhere before that, but I didn't realize you had, traveled to that many different places and gone down to Southern California, and then we're at San Francisco State. So that's cool to hear. And while you're at Maritime, I know you guys had a lot of success, especially right after I had graduated. You guys won what, 4 or 5 league championships in a row or something like that, right?
Something like that. Yeah, I think it was. We ended up winning like 7 total, and so we had some really, really good groups. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. But the battles with the Oaks were never easy. They were great competition for sure.
Yeah, no, it was definitely fun to get out there, and it was for me, as especially as I got out of playing and I could just kind of watch as a coaching standpoint, it was cool to see how you really did build that program up. And you turn that program to like you said, a nationally ranked team almost every year. And that's I think that speaks to a testament of the culture that you build and, what you have with your program. So, and obviously I've seen you guys have done a pretty good job at Cal State East Bay as well. So, all right, well, let's get into the actual content today. We're going to be talking a little bit about, basketball IQ and all that. So I guess my first question for you, Coach, is how would you describe basketball IQ for someone that doesn't know what that means? What is basketball IQ?
Well, I think it was funny. I was thinking about this because obviously it's a big part of recruiting, right? For us and basketball IQ. And I kind of equate it to, when you're taking a test, whether it be the SAT or a math test or whatever it might be. And the teacher, puts 4 questions on there. And there's maybe 3 out of the 4 that could be the answer, but it's the proverbial choose the best answer. And that's kind of how I equate basketball IQ is there's a lot of decisions to be made for players, right? When you look at offensively, do you shoot it? Do you pass it? Do you bounce it? All the things that come into it. And there could be a decision that's a good decision, but basketball IQ to me, as we evaluate, is what's the best decision that can be made in that time. And then certainly defensively as well. Obviously, I'm sure we'll get into a little bit, but the game is so much right now on the defensive end guarding, you got to guard ball screens. And so from an IQ standpoint, do you make the best decision in terms of guarding it, the best decisions offensively, because it's such a skill game right now. I watched the NBA and the bubble, and it's one of the, I'm sure you guys are on this. It's so cool right now. You wake up in the morning, you get some work done, and at some point during the day for the next 8 or 9 hours, there's going to be a game on. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that just kind of blows me away is the spacing of the NBA. They do such a great job. And a huge piece of that, I think, is the ability of almost every guy on the floor is able to shoot it. And so the skill level is really, really high. But now it's, can those guys make the best decision when they get in the teeth of the defense off of penetration or on a catch and shoot opportunity, all those things that come into decision making. So I think that's, for me, basketball IQ wise, is can you make the best decision when whatever decision comes up? Because obviously throughout the course of the game, there's going to be, dozens, if not hundreds of decisions to be made. So can you make that best one in that moment?
That's interesting. One thing you mentioned there was, decision making on the defensive end and guarding ball screens. So as a coach, first of all, how do you guard ball screens? Do you guys have one way that you do it? Do you have it, different for whatever team you're playing? And kind of the second question to follow up to that is, do you give your players any kind of freedom to make decisions on how they're guarding a ball screen? Like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get out in the hedge here, so I'm going to play more like drop coverage on this one. Or is it for you guys more written in stone? Like, this is how we guard ball screens every time. How do you guys do that?
I think it's a little bit in the middle. We're flexible in terms of how we guard ball screens, just because I think that players, again, we go back to the skill level. Players are so skilled right now. And IQ-wise, there's some really smart players that we're going to play against. So I think if you give them the same coverage every single time, I think at some point it's going to get figured out. But I think, again, it's a balance of our guys have to have confidence in whatever coverage we're running, then we're going to be able to execute that. And so I think that's where preparation comes into in terms of when we go into it, we'll guard ball screens. I think if you were to, look at our coverages, we'll guard it 4 or 5 different ways in terms of where we're going. But when we go into a game or we go into a specific action that we're going to cover, we're going to guard it one way at that time. Because I think you get a really slippery slope when you're going into it and a guy's on the fly saying, well, I couldn't get there, so I'm going to drop it, or I couldn't get there, so I'm going to go underneath it. Especially defensively, we're pretty big on non-negotiables, and our non-negotiables to your question of ball screen coverage. And so, for example, like if we're going to ice it or we're going to down it, there's not an option to get beat over the top. Like that's not, like, obviously we know, right, that happens, but when we're drilling it, when we're going through and we're prepping for a game, we're saying, hey, when they come in and they're running Texas, you cannot get beat over the top. Like if they go baseline side, our post guy is going to be right there. We're going to make sure we lock it up and L our feet together. And so I think there's, I would say we're a little bit more flexible on the offensive end than we are the defensive end. We'll have multiple coverages for things, but when we're in that coverage, we're pretty steadfast in saying, hey, this is how we're going to guard it in terms of our attack. And we found success with that. And I would say, going back to, how we guarded ball screens maybe 5 years ago is very different than how we guard ball screens right now. But the direction and kind of conviction of how we go about it really hasn't changed.
Thank you. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think like to a certain extent, if you get too fluid with it, it makes you put more pressure on the people that are, either guarding the ball or in help or whatever it is, to all be on the same page without knowing what the other person's going to do. And so when you stick to one thing, I think it's a lot easier to just be like, okay, this is how we're all going to do it. So, it may not work every time, it may be wrong sometimes, but at least we're all on the same page and we can react and help each other out, as opposed to, I'm guessing, is my point guard or whoever's getting screened going to jump high side? Is he going to stay low? Then you don't really know. You're not working out together there. So, well,
it's funny. We were talking about earlier of like the zooms. I heard a great quote, and I'll probably butcher it here, so bear with me, but it's something to the effect of, don't fail the plan, let the plan fail you. Meaning get everybody on the same page in terms of where you are. So that's, so I'll get to your question of like we might change. There might be 5 possessions in a row that we might change it 3 out of those 5 times or 4 of those 5 times. But at the beginning of that possession, everybody needs to know what we're doing in that way. And so that's why communication is huge. Getting guys in a huddle together. One of the things that in every single huddle that we'll have, obviously coming out of a timeout, but at a free throw, at a dead ball, we want our guys together. And one of the things we've got to know is, how are we going to guard a ball screen? How are we going to guard this action that's coming up, with it? Because I think, again, it goes back to Alex, to your point, you have to be able to trust the guys you're playing with. And I think that blends exactly into the IQ question of how we attack it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I kind of feeding off of that, and we've, I guess, touched on it a little bit already in this conversation, but why is basketball IQ so important? When people, I think a lot of people, when they watch the game, they see, like you said, the skill set. They see someone shooting a 3, someone dunking. They may not understand why is it important to have a high basketball IQ. So maybe touch on that a little bit for us.
I think that's the beauty of our game, and that they keep score, right? I mean, there's a winner and there's a loser that go into it. And in my opinion, it's not all about IQ. You can't just be a really smart basketball player but lack skill and not be able to shoot it or dribble it or pass it. But it's a combination, of the two. And so, in my opinion, in direct answer to your question, I think basketball IQ is a huge predictor for winning. And that's obviously that's what we're doing every possession, every game that goes into it. And then I think the other piece of it too is, they talked about, what are you taught? What is learned? What do you just have naturally? I think IQ, in my opinion, is something that you can develop. And so with that is, if you can develop it, if you can get better at it and your IQ increases and that helps your team win, I think as a teammate, you're sending a pretty clear message to your fellow teammates and to your whole team of how invested you are in the process. They talk about guys when they come in as freshmen, and they're so much different when they're juniors or seniors. And that's obviously physically and getting in the weight room. But I also think too, the guys that make the biggest jump are those guys that really dive into the game, whether it's film study, whether it's, just being able to be real transparent and coming to a coach and saying, hey, I don't totally get this. Can we navigate this a little bit more? And that's as important, I think, than getting extra shots before, practice or after practice or whatever it might be. So I think that's a big piece that, we talk about in our program about, being transformative with one another. And I think putting time in of increasing your IQ is part of that process.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything else that you want to touch on that.
Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned the there's a balance, basically, kind of what you were saying as far as, your skill level and your IQ. So which balance would you be more in favor of having? A player who has a high level of IQ, but maybe not, athletic and maybe not as skilled, or a player who has less IQ, but is that kind of more of that super athlete, he can create his own shot. Like what's the better balance?
I think I think obviously we go out in recruiting, and one of the first things that you're looking in recruiting, because it's out there more, is, where's a guy at athletically, right? Where's a guy at skill wise? That stuff is, I think, easier to see on initial evaluations, so I think in terms of looking at, hey, I can watch a guy, we can watch a guy, in one game and get a pretty good idea where he is skill wise, athleticism. I think sometimes it takes a little bit longer of where a guy is, from an IQ standpoint, because a guy can make a really good decision, but that doesn't mean he has a really high IQ. And so what we want, I think, when we look at it in terms of that balance, is we want a guy that, one of our kind of core things in recruiting is, does a guy have high potential? And we want it in both ways. We want there to be a high potential in terms of his skill level. He may not be, a great shooter right now, but that might be, due to a couple dynamics. Maybe he's, a 6'6" guy that plays on the high school team, and he's played inside all the time. And so he hasn't made, many threes in high school career. But when we see him shoot, we see that there can be kind of some inner workings of a guy making progress. And so I think our biggest thing is, does he see himself of having a high ceiling in both of those areas? Because that's what we want to do. I mean, so much of what we're trying to do is, it's not a situation we're getting a guy, just for 1 year at 18 years old. We're hopefully getting him over the course of, 3, 4, 5 years. And so our biggest thing in both of those areas is that there's a high ceiling to what he's going to be.
Nice. Yeah. And I think when we're talking about IQ, there's just so many intangible ways to think about basketball IQ. And so, yeah, is his decision making good? Because I've had players where I felt like as a player, you have good basketball IQ because you make the right reads when you play free, and you take shots when you should take shots. I'm like, wow, okay, you're doing all the right things. You're a smart player. But then when I go and put in a new offense or something that has a little bit more structure or whatever, I'm like, he can't run it. And at that point, I feel like, okay, you have a low basketball IQ because you don't understand what we're trying to do right now with this offense. This is like some false motion we're trying to run to get this, but every time we run this false motion, you're jacking it up or trying to dribble. And so I guess my question is, have you seen players that fall into either one of those categories where they are smart decision makers, but they can't really pick up the X's and O's?
Yeah, and I think it gets back to, in my opinion, part of our responsibility as coaches is, I think you hear it a lot, is one of our roles as coaches is to take advantage of the strengths of our players. And so I think to kind of your point or your question is, if you have a guy that's really good in kind of open space and coming off the ball screens, if he's really good getting out in transition, but he's not as good, in terms of, hey, we're going to run a set, then can we design our offensive action of running our sets where he can see himself? Like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Like, we're trying to get you downhill. So this action that we have, it's so the other four guys are in a situation so that when you attack, you're going to have space to take advantage of your strengths of making that decision that we have. And I think, again, it goes back to, we talked about before, is where is the guy's ceiling? I think as long as the guy is open to improving, open to getting better, I think in your example, the tough thing is if a guy is not picking it up and he just says, I don't get it, like I can't do it, then I think that really restricts a guy to go. But I think that's where, people always ask me, in the recruiting process, we'll have, coaches or parents and certainly players like, hey, what's your style? And I think for us defensively, like we're gonna, one of the things Alex and I were talking about a couple of days ago is, changing defenses is we're pretty much a man-to-man team, right? We don't play a whole lot of zone. Doesn't mean zone's bad. It's just that we're going to choose to just be a tough man-to-man team. That's kind of our deal. But offensively, like we're going to change every single year because the players change, right? You bring guys in recruiting wise, guys get better in certain areas. And so I think that's part of our responsibility as coaches is where a guy is from an IQ stand, get him to grow, but also maximize where he is at his best. And I think if we do that, then I think our players see that too, and they're going to be a little more bought in overall.
I know, like for myself, I had some of the more successful teams I was on where we did win conference championships. We were able to, our IQ was good enough as a whole unit that we were able to switch very easily between different offenses and defenses and pick it up, on the fly if coach yelled out something. It worked really well because it could throw the other teams off. They weren't always sure what we were in, or they couldn't, like you said, they couldn't hone in on the same offense every time or the same defense every time. So is that something that you guys do where you kind of, you switch your stuff around a lot on both sides of the ball, or are you more, okay, these are our guns, we're sticking to them. We may adjust a little bit here and there, but more or less we run what we run?
Yeah, I mean, I think both sides of the floor, a little bit like we talked about before. I think defensively, again, goes back to the ball screens. There's so much in the game right now from ball screen standpoint is we're going to try not to allow teams to get in a rhythm in terms of that. So I think that's where the biggest thing where you'll see the change in coverages that we'll have. We may change it from team to team, so if we're playing on a Thursday, Saturday, we may be way more ice and down, on a Thursday, and then we play a different team in terms of their attack. We may be more of a switching, or we may zone off the first ball screen or whatever it might be. And then I think offensively, what we've tried to do and trying to move more towards it is to operate more in concepts. I have a great deal of respect for the players that we play against, but certainly the coaches as well. And things are going to be really well scouted. I mean, that's like synergy. Like I love synergy because I remember when we first got into coaching, like it was old school, like VHS tapes. Like if you wanted to do a clip tape, you had to press this and press that. And I will tell you, and I'm not afraid to admit it, I messed it up a ton of times. So when synergy came around, first of all, my wife loved it because it saved a lot of time, and I actually got to take her out like on a date like once every 3 months. But with that, in terms of going into it, is everything's going to be scouted, right? They're going to know the actions that you're going to run if they're doing their job, and everybody's doing their job these days. And so for us is operate in the concepts of where we are, and one of the biggest concepts is spacing. And I think in terms of us being able to make decisions, that's going to be dictated on, do the other four guys that don't have the ball, do they understand what we're trying to do? And so we're going to have play calls, we're going to have actions, but more importantly, I want our players to understand the concept of what we're trying to do. Like, what's a good shot for us? A good shot for us is an uncontested 3-point shot or an attack to the basket with an advantage. So it doesn't matter what we're running, we're trying to get those two things every single possession. And, so to your question, do we change what we run to get those? Absolutely. But those two things are always going to be at the forefront of what we're trying to do.
Got me a little fired up there, Coach, talking about playing off concepts and stuff, because my evolution as a coach so far has gone from, strict structure, sets, that kind of stuff. And now I'm converting more into this concept, this, more read and react type flow offense type stuff. So when you're talking about playing out of concepts, I'm guessing, are you running some sort of motion offensively, or what kind of stuff are you guys doing offensively?
Yeah, we'll do some ball screen motion. We'll do some different actions out of where we might have, some might look at it as almost like some false motion. It's not really intended to be false motion, but it's getting our guys into, okay, let's make a decision. So two guys come together, and every time one's going to go this way and one's going to go that way, but it's not predetermined which guy's going where, if that makes sense. And so I think those type of things, getting into it. And again, I think it goes back to, and we try to talk about with our players, and it's an evolution for sure, but there's a huge trust in that. I vividly remember I was at Maritime. We were playing a game in Fresno, and we were at the In-N-Out or whatever after the game. And it was like one of the first or second games of the season. And we had made a commitment to running motion. But I think with that, you're putting a lot of trust and a lot of, kind of handing over the keys to the car to the team. And I vividly remember I was talking to one of the assistants, said, hey, we got to scrap it all. Like we can't do it. We got to go back. We got to run stuff. We got to run calls, this and that. And he's a lot, and he continues to be a lot smarter than I am. And he certainly was in that moment. He goes, just give it time. And then as that team developed, it ended up being one of the better teams offensively that we had, because we had patience and we stuck with it. But like you talked about, it's hard to do, right? Because it's easier. It's easier to go through and just, hey, we're going to run this. But again, where are we going to ultimately be at the end of the season? Because that's our goal, right? As coaches, is that we're playing our best when our best is required. And we hope for all of us with all of our teams, that's the postseason.
So you don't have to dive in too deep into the X's though, but I'm curious on what kind of spacing is kind of like your guys' base space to run this kind of offense.
Right. I mean, I think the first thing I kind of like it too. Just, we're going to talk about conditioning. Like, so when we're doing conditioning, one of the things I promised with our guys, because when I first got into this, I was an English teacher, and I was my college major, and that obviously, like all of us, that allows us to coach if we're teaching. And so I despise busy work, right? I don't like busy work. I want there to be something purposeful in all the stuff that we assign, whether to our students, to our players. And so I say that because, like, when we're doing our conditioning, we'll talk about, okay, we're sprinting right now. And we're not just sprinting to sprint. We're sprinting because every time, if you were a 2 or 3 in our offense, you have to get to the corner every single time. Like that's our spacing every single time to go down. Because what do you see a lot of times? Guys are running, but if they don't get the ball and they get about that hash mark at 3-point, they start slowing down. And again, that messes everything up in terms of from a spacing. So we want to get ourselves all the way down to the corner. We want to get our rim runner. We call it our rocket man. We want to get our rocket man every time, no matter what offense we're running. We want him to threaten the rim. Obviously, because we get over the top, we get an easy basket. But also we want to get that spacing to go. And so those are 3 big hallmarks for us conceptually, is just getting down the floor. Because what we want to create a lot is, starting in transition, we want to create advantages. We want to create 2-on-1s. We want to create 3-on-2s, potentially 4-on-3s. And we'll spend a lot of time in practice, like with our decisions drill, and everything is predicated on the spacing of that, of our guys getting all the way down to the corners, all the way down to the rim.
Very nice. Okay.
All right. Good.
All right, we're good.
Okay. All right. So, Coach, some other questions about kind of how you develop that in practice. Like, what do you use to, challenge decision making and to challenge IQ to help them get ready for those game situations?
Yeah, I think, and we talked about it, a minute ago. But we'll try to do a lot of things. We started to do this in the last 3 or 4 years of putting scenarios in, and to Augie's point, in terms of the concepts of, we'll call it our decisions drill. We'll start in the full court and then go in the half court, and we'll go 3-on-2, we'll go 4-on-3, we'll go 5-on-4. And so we'll create an advantage for the offense to start, but then we'll also flip it and we'll create an advantage defensively. And so instead of necessarily saying, hey, we're running 5-on-0 perfect offense, which we will do in terms of our, kind of our sets and things like that. We're saying, okay, now we've run this. Here's where we got the advantage. You're coming off a ball screen. They're trailing you. Now you're at 20 feet with an advantage. There's a guy in a corner. You've got a covered guy. You've got the guy in the dunker spot. Now, ball goes, boom, blow the whistle, and then we're playing. And so we try to do a lot of things that simulate what we're going to see in the game, especially offensively to go. And then I think defensively, it works the same way, right? So what are we doing, when we get into our shell stuff? We have to have foundational things. Before we ask our guys to make decisions on either end of the floor, they have to make sure they have the foundational pieces. So it's a little bit easier offensively, right? Because you spend the, part of your practice, shooting, doing game speed shots, doing shots you're going to get out of your offense, handling the ball, obviously passing and those things. So those can incorporate a little bit cleaner in terms of those decisions. But now defensively, when we get into it, we got to get a stance. We got to know what a stance is. We got to know where we're going to be spacing wise off the ball. We got to know where we're forcing when we're closing out, to the ball. And then once we have those foundational pieces, then we jump in and we give them those kind of same decision-making to go. And so, like, for example, we go in, we're scouting an opponent. We're going to know, hopefully, what they're going to run and how they're going to attack, who they're going to try to get the ball with. So now in practice, here's our scenario. Our scenario is, boom, 11 got the ball, coming off a stagger. How are we guarding that stagger? How are we going to do it when the ball comes back to the point guard? Now they got a ball screen coming into it. It's a sprint ball screen from their 5. We're going to guard it one way. It's a sprint ball screen from their 4. We're going to guard it a different way. But basically putting our players in a situation where it's a little bit uncomfortable, because we'll explain it, but then it's like, whistle, go, let's figure it out. Because again, when do we want those mistakes? When we want to correct them? We much rather do them in practice. So that in the game, they've already seen it. They already know it. They've already experienced it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, like you said, the more that they can get that, practice with it beforehand and get a few more reps in, then when it comes to a game, they're more likely to be able to react the right way when they do encounter those situations. And when you're talking, like, I know there's been more research lately just in general about like optimal practice times, optimal practice lengths. I think I remember reading something in the NBA at one point. I don't know if they're still doing this, but they were like pushing back practices to try and let players sleep more. And there's some research into that as well. So is there optimal practice time and length so that, your athletes can learn better and become better high IQ players?
I think a huge part of it is, what are we trying to accomplish that day? I think a lot of times that dictates, quote unquote, how long practice is going to be. And, I think I've always subscribed to, a coach I had is practice is going to be as long as it needs to be. It shouldn't be any longer and it shouldn't be any shorter type of thing. And so that's going to, kind of dictate by the time of year, I think in some ways. Like, you're early in the year, you're probably going to go a little bit longer. But as the year progresses, that's going to be scaled back. And I think the other thing too is, because I think it's always funny to me, because I don't know where you guys are with this, but if somebody told me every day for 2 hours I'd get to exercise, like, I would love that, right? It's a lot better than, putting the Nike app and running around the neighborhood or getting on a treadmill. But sometimes as players, you lose sight of that, right? Because you just can't wait to get to the games. And so I think one of our things is we try to be really transparent with our guys of what we need to accomplish that day. And again, I've transitioned, hopefully in a positive way. Like when I was at Maritime, our practices, if we had the late slot for us was like 8 p.m. and there was nobody coming in after us. And, there was at the NAI level, there wasn't, you didn't have the 20-hour week. And so we had some long ones. And I've learned from that. We don't exactly go for 4 hours anymore for a lot of different reasons. But again, I think it goes back to, from a practice length, is you have to go in with a plan. I mean, our staff, we'll spend an hour and a half as a staff planning practice every single day because we want it minute by minute. It goes back. I don't want any busy work. I want it all purposeful. And so sometimes that means we're going for 2 hours. Sometimes that means we'll go for 45 minutes. I think it's what's required at that time, and more importantly, what your team needs, because that's always going to be changing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What does a practice for you look like? How do you chunk it? What are your daily vitamins that you're doing every day? And if you could just kind of break that down, I think that'd be pretty valuable for Alex and myself to learn, as well as our listeners.
Right. I think that, one of the things we want to start with always is we always want to start with player development. And a lot of people talk about that with skill development, but I think it's bigger than that. I think it's player development, right? In terms of all areas, offensively, defensively. So our goal in terms of going into a practice is we're always going to have, 20 minutes that's dedicated to specifically player development, individual development that goes into it. Sometimes that'll be at the beginning, sometimes it'll be in the middle, sometimes it'll be at the end. And that's usually a minimum. We don't want to go less than that, no matter where we are in the time of the year, because that's something that, is very, very important all the time. And then for us, we try to get into a bit of a rhythm of our guys knowing, kind of what's going to happen. And so we'll break it up each day. So one day, like on a Monday, we'll do an offensive warm-up. So we'll go through a series of offensive warm-ups where we're working on a lot of things. Like we're working on fundamentals of coming to a stop. We're working on, passing and putting the ball, right where it needs to be. We're obviously doing shooting. All this stuff is as a team. And then communication is a huge piece of what we do with those. And then the next day when we come to practice, we flip it and we go defensive warm-ups. And so that's going to send us into practice every day. And then I'm a big believer in being competitive. I want everything that we do to be competitive. And sometimes that's competitive against, versus, whether it be, red versus white, or sometimes that's just competitive within our team of kind of attacking a mental challenge that might be going on that the coaches present to them. But everything that we're going to do, especially once we get the building blocks in it, is there's going to be something on the line. And I've never really been on like, hey, it matters how much, you have to run if you lose. I think it's just more of a matter of, let's just understand that, again, goes back to what we talked about before, is they're going to keep score. So we're going to keep scoring everything that we do, whether it's, perfect offense and we're running our action, we got to do that correctly, or we're going 5-on-5 full court, and we're playing a 5-minute game in practice. I think that those are kind of the core tenets of what we have of player development. We've got to make sure that we're competitive, and there's got to be a translation to the game. Those are three big things for us in everything we do.
Nice. Thank you.
What do you guys use with film? Like, obviously you talked about you love Synergy. You use film. How much do you use it with your players as far as bringing them in, sitting them down, having them look at film? Is it more for the coaching staff? Is it, a mix, or what do you do with that?
I think, it goes back to the point that was made earlier that I think Augie brought up, where you have a guy seems like he's got a really good high IQ in this area, but then it doesn't translate maybe into another. And so I think with film, it's the same way of trying to find the connection of some guys, benefit a ton by film, right? And some guys, more film, that just is kind of like a sensory overload for them. And so I think for each guy, it's finding the mix and what fits them the best. And so, like for us, we'll have an individual meeting every single week that they've got a dedicated time where they're going to come in and it's just the player and we're meeting, and it's all the time we're going to ask them. That's a life thing, right? Just how's life going, and sometimes it stays on that conversation for the whole time, okay, because of just kind of what's going on in their life. It's always going to include academics because obviously that's a huge piece of that thing. And then, right, if we transition to that, then we're getting into basketball. And honestly, we may not. I may come in and say, hey, I've got these 10 clips that I want to watch with Alex, and we may never get to those clips, right? Because we're just talking about how life is going, how the transition to college is, how your class is going academically. You got the test coming up. But then I think when we get to the basketball side of it, sometimes that 10 clips with a guy, sometimes that gets to 20 clips. Sometimes that stays at 5. I think the big thing is, to talk about this obviously in teaching as well, as you got to meet our students, you got to meet our players where they are, right? We have a goal where we want to get them. We got to meet them wherever they are. And so for each guy, it's kind of an individual thing to go. I've had film sessions with guys. We've broken down an entire game. I've had some guys that we've watched 5 clips, and both of them and anywhere in between have been really, really impactful with it. I also think kind of the last thing with film is, I think it makes a big difference when they're watching themselves, because the proverbial film does not lie. Like it's not one of those things. Like you can tell me what you thought was happening, but when we're watching it, that's literally what happened. And so I think that's a big thing we'll watch on opponents for sure. But a lot of times when we're doing our one-on-one work, we're watching them watch themselves, because I think that's an important piece of their development as well.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the luxuries that I wish that we had at the high school level, is to be able to, we can clip stuff out obviously, but it's our own manual time to clip everything out, at least for us at our school. I don't know if it's the same for you, but at the high school level, because not everyone's on the same page, we don't always get access to that clipping. And I remember that and how nice that was, because it saves so much time and it's so much more direct about, an individual player.
Well, and I think the other thing too is and this, we don't have the luxury, so we're kind of in the same boat, is practice film, so we make it a goal to film every practice
Wow.
That goes on, because we want them to see that, because, you look at a guy that comes in, maybe a guy's redshirting, right? And you don't want to have the only film that he's watching when he's not on the floor, right? Because that's just a reminder of, he wants to be on the floor. It doesn't matter why he's redshirting. He wants to be out there. And so utilizing that in practice, or, a guy that's maybe in a bit of a shooting slump, but man, he's defending like crazy. So you bring him in and you watch him practice film, say, hey, this is why we're getting better at what you're doing. And then the same guy where you need you need more out of him. And, he may say, hey, I had 16, I had 16 and 12 in the last game, but now we're watching, and you got this defensive breakdown and that defensive breakdown, and how can we clean all of those up? And so, and I think the other thing too, and it goes back to the relationship piece, because I think that's huge for all of us in coaching, is and I know this as a player, is when a coach took the time to watch film, to sit down and really engage in my game and how it related to, what we were doing and watching on film, that was huge, and I want to make sure that that's obviously a big part of our process with our guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that relationship building is huge. I think it builds that trust between everybody. So I'm very much in agreement with that. All right. One last question before we get you out of here, Coach. And this is, again, related to IQ, but kind of just the mental side of the game in general is, are there any programs in place or anything you guys do to help, with your players to stay up on their mental health? And we're specifically kind of talking about their confidence in the game. It can relate to stuff off the court as well. But confidence is a big killer in games or in the game of basketball. If you're really talented, you don't have confidence, you could be the worst player on the floor, and you could be an average player with really high confidence and good decision making and make yourself a lot better than you really are. So what do you guys do with that, and what do you have in place to kind of help those athletes out?
I think the big thing for us is kind of our attack with it, whether it be confidence, mental health, the whole deal is, it goes back to the point that you had just made of the relationship piece of where it is. And it starts in the recruiting process, but it has to be continued every single day. And honestly, this is a great test of it. And I can't remember who made the comment, but when the Pac-12 came out, football, and they said, we're not playing football in the fall, and obviously all the fall sports. And I can't even remember what school it was, but player posted, said, well, now I'm going to really find out how much my coaches care. And I thought it was such an interesting, we share that with our guys because, we're not playing a game for at least a couple months. And so the relationship that we as coaches have with our players, it can't just be about basketball with it. And so one of the kind of the oppositions that we use, excuse me, and we brought up the term a little bit before, is, are we transactional or are we transformative, right? And so for us, we talk about the idea of, there's a reason I got into coaching. And as I referenced at the beginning, it was because I love basketball, but also because I had unbelievable mentors. And every single one of the mentors and coaches that I had, my relationship extended well beyond whether the shot went in or didn't go in for me or for our team. And we want to make sure that that is connected to them as well. We have in our first recruiting class, so our second year, because when I got the job, our players, I was getting to know them. I hadn't got an opportunity to recruit them, but with our first recruiting class in our second year, we had, in the span of like 3 weeks, we had one player diagnosed with cancer, and one player was basically had to get open heart surgery. And so right away it was like, man, like what is the relationship really about? And at that point, really, it had been just about the recruiting, because they hadn't been in our program really for much time at all. But even with guys that were, in this case, completely healthy, is what's the relationship piece of it? And I say all of that because at the end of the day, when you talk about kind of mental health, and there's so many people that are doing some unbelievable things, in my kind of simplistic way that I look at it, is I want our players at the end of every day knowing that we care about them. And that can sound cliche and the whole thing, but that care has to extend far beyond. And so when you talk about kind of what we do with them, one of the things we try to do is to get them very invested in the program, no matter what their role is. We talk to our guys a lot about, no role is going to be exactly the same. Your role is not going to be the same as mine. It's not going to be the same as the next guy, but no role is any more or less important. And so one of our biggest things that we have with mental health is making sure that we help them define and show them what their role can be, and then help them live that role out as best they possibly can. And there's a lot of ways we try to do that. That's interactions daily. That's, text, that's calls, that's FaceTime, that's all those type of things that go into it. And so I think that's our biggest approach, because, I have, as I told you before, I have 3 brothers, and one of my brothers he's in finance, he's in banking. So he deals with numbers and transactions all the time. And he does really well at it because he's really smart. But I didn't choose to do that. I chose to get into basketball and coaching, and more important, the relationships. And if we can be transformative in those relationships, then I think that we're going to be moving in a pretty good direction with it, and specifically with their mental health.
And I was actually talking to Og before you got on here about how I know, a handful of players, probably between 5 and 10 players, that have played for you at some point in their lives. And I have never heard a single player say anything ever negative about you coaching them. They're all very, very like, I love Coach Rooney. I love what he does. It felt like a family. And, when I hear that over and over, because normally, no matter how good a coach is, you're always going to have 1 or 2 people that are like, I didn't really like it. I didn't play enough, or this, that, and the other. And I've never heard anything like that. So again, that's a testament to the culture that I think you've built wherever you go. And I have a lot of respect for that. So
I appreciate that. And I can't tell you that you couldn't find one, right? There's probably a player out there that wishes things had gone a little bit differently, but I don't have any regrets of the players that I've coached. And I think that's, as coaches, we love to say we do everything perfect, but there's been times when I look back and say, man, I could have done that differently, or I could have been better in how I handled that relationship in terms of that. But one of the last things I'll leave you with, and to kind of to your point, is when I got into coaching, I thought I had an idea of why I got into coaching, and I thought it came from a pretty good spot. But it really changed in many ways, and this is going back 11 plus years ago when our daughter was born, and then again a couple years later when our son was born. Is I'm in a very unique opportunity in that I have a chance to, in some ways, right? We don't get everybody that we recruit, but I have a chance to choose who are around my children. And that's the thing that probably I'm most proud of. Like we've won a decent amount of games. We've won championships in program. We've kind of moved programs along and built them, which I think, I know that I'm proud of, but I'm way more proud of the fact that my wife and I, unfortunately, we made a lot of mistakes as parents. We don't do them on purpose, but it happens. But one thing that I know is how proud I am of the players that are around our children and who I get to be around every single day. And so I think that's one of my biggest motivations with it is to continue that and do a better job as a coach, so that hopefully, like you talked about, when past players can look back and feel proud of the experience that they had.
Well, thank you, Coach. Thank you so much for joining us. Og, you got any last thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I just want to say thank you as well. And I thought it was a really good episode. A lot of things to take away, and some intangible things too, like the relationship stuff. I thought that was really good. And so definitely something I'm going to take to heart.
Awesome, guys. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for including me and involving me. I love watching your work. I remember Coach Kirby and I, we were some years removed. He's younger than I am and better looking. But we actually both played at Delta for Coach Katz. So it was great hearing him. And I just love what you're doing and continue to spread the game. So thanks for having me involved.
All right. Thanks again, Coach, for joining us. And for everyone else that's watching, we appreciate you joining us today. If you like today's episode, make sure you like and subscribe on either YouTube, on Spotify, or on iTunes. We do come out with a new episode once every week. So we hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace.